My name's Ken Ilgunas. I'm a author. I'm a sometimes journalist. I'm an occasional park ranger, usually up in Alaska. I'm from Buffalo, New York, though I was born in Canada, and now I live in Scotland, the United Kingdom. So I'm kind of all over the place. So a few years ago, I was thinking about climate change a lot, and I just kind of looked at my life and looked at what I was doing and didn't feel like I was, doing anything for the cause. I was working for the oil industry at one point. So me and a friend, we devised this plan to follow the path of a controversial oil pipeline called Keystone XL. I'm sure we've all heard that name before. And we weren't sure how to engage with this pipeline. We weren't sure if we were just going to go to Washington, D.C. and hold up signs or research it and moan on Facebook. But then we kind of looked at ourselves and looked at what we were good at. We loved hiking. We loved writing. So we decided to hike it, to walk every mile of this 1,700-mile pipeline. I say we, this would eventually turn into I, when my buddy decided he couldn't go on the trip. So I did this trip alone. It took me about 4.5 months.
Throughout your journey, your ethos is, I'll figure it out. And seeing as you didn't die and accomplished pretty much all of your goals on the journey, has that made you apply, I'll figure it out, to the rest of your life post-hike?
I think my quote in the book was, F it, I'll figure it out. And yeah, I think that's actually a pretty useful philosophy. Maybe not for everything, but for some things. Like, I just moved to the United Kingdom and started a family, and that was kind of we'll figure this out. You don't really know what you're getting yourself into, but you just kind of begin to draw on inner resources you didn't think were there before. So kind of before my hike, I didn't know what I'd be encountering. I didn't know if I was going to be shot by a landowner. I didn't know if I was going to be in a stampede of cows. I didn't know if some mountain lion was going to sink its fangs into my neck. I didn't know what to expect, but from the experiences I had, I did know that maybe I have it in me to kind of adapt to any situation, and that was the case for this. Every day I had to play 20 different roles because I was the only person looking out for me. I was my emotional picker-upper. I was my medic. I was my planner. I was the cook. I was sewing up my pants every day from all the barbed wire I'd tear on. Just like I'd have to deal with landowners and property owners all the time, and I'm normally a pretty quiet, somewhat shy person, but I'd have to be able to charm people. I'd have to, and after you do these things, you just kind of realize, maybe I'm not faking it. Maybe I had these qualities as a person in me all along. They just yet to be drawn out.
Okay, so did you deliberately read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings during your journey for the sake of the analogy, or was that coincidental?
That was coincidental, but there was just kind of something about the journey that made me hunger for another journey book, a journey book that was even more treacherous and dangerous. So when I was reading about Frodo and Sam and the rest of the Fellowship on this really arduous hike where they were being threatened left and right by orcs and whatnot, it made my comparatively but still sort of dangerous hike across the Great Plains just a bit more easy to swallow. And it was just something just wonderful about being on this hike and going 20 miles a day and seeing hills and trees and deer and cows and being on my own adventure, and then just kind of getting in my nice warm sleeping bag and opening up the Kindle app on my iPad and just really just getting myself lost in these books. And to be honest, I've never felt so, what's the word? Just immersed is exactly the word. I'd never felt so immersed in kind of these fictional stories before, and I don't know what that was. I think it was just because I was living such a distractionless life, When I read now, there's a phone not too far from me, and there's emails to check and Facebook updates to check. So I just don't have the same attention span that I did on that hike. So sometimes I would read for 3 or 4 hours straight until I had to get up and go to the bathroom or whatever. And it was wonderful. I always looked forward to getting in my tent and cracking open one of these books.
You often use libraries during your journey. What do libraries mean to you?
Well, there's this recent book out, which I'm sure you've come across, called Palaces of the People. And I think that's just a wonderful way of describing libraries. Just sometimes I just feel so disenchanted with the commercialization of all life, where everything costs something to get into. I'm just going to sound like a crazy idealist here, but I would just much rather live in a universe where things are given with generosity or traded or publicly owned. And I think that's partly why I'm so drawn to something like the Scottish right to roam, because in Scotland the land is not just mine, it's not just yours. In some way maybe it is, but it's also ours. It's something that's shared. So I think libraries are just one of those few things in America that are inherently communitarian. It's inherently shared. It's inherently ours.
I hate asking any writer about the creative process because it's always the same answer. You write, then you revise. But you eloquently express the value of being a traveling idler in Trespassing Across America. So my question is this: how valuable is walking and being outside in general to your writing?
Oh, it's critical. I mean, if I'm walking more, walking to me is thinking. It's the opportunity to think. It's the solitude that comes with it. It's not only that, it's the stimuli you're bringing into your system and processing it and making sense of the world and coming up with fresh ideas. My last book, This Land is Our Land, that's a book in which I argue for a different system of private property, a different system of land ownership. And these ideas came not just from sitting behind a computer or having a book in front of me. It came from walking. It came from experiencing the right to roam, as they call it in Scotland. It comes from just the inspiration that nature sometimes imparts. So yeah, sometimes when I have what you might call writer's block or career block or whatever, going on a walk in nature is sometimes the best solution.
You mentioned this. What is the right to roam, and why is it important to you?
So, I'm American, but I live in the United Kingdom. I've done so for the past 3 or 4 years. The way each country thinks about land ownership and private property is very different. I love America. I'll always be American no matter where I'm living, but one of my biggest critiques of it is just kind of how unfriendly it is to the walker, how unfriendly it is to the pedestrian. To get anywhere, you need to get in a car, unless you're living in a nice little college town or a big city like New York City. It's very difficult to be a pedestrian here. Sometimes you have to drive several hours to get to a state park or a national park. In the UK, it's different, specifically Scotland. Typically, most people can leave their front door and find some green space and have just like a little mini day adventure or something bigger, depending on what he or she needs. Not only that, but you have a law. You have a law guaranteeing the right to roam. The more technical term is the right of responsible access. So someone in Scotland, and this is going to sound crazy to Americans, but someone in Scotland has the freedom to walk, camp, paddle a canoe, ride a horse, ride a mountain bike, wherever he or she likes, whether it's on public land or private land. You are legally allowed to go on other people's lands, not in their backyard, not in their swimming pool or anything like that, so long as you're doing so responsibly. And what that means at the end of the day for society, it's improved physical health, it's improved mental health, it's having a civic relationship with your community. It's a sense of equality, because suddenly the outdoors isn't just, for the fortunate. It's open to everybody. It's a steroid shot of freedom you get in your life every day. So that's one of the things I most like about my life in Scotland, and it's very different than the no trespassing signs you see all over the place here.
Now, you are presently living in Scotland. How much of that is your Scottish heritage? How much of that is just Scotland containing a lot of gorgeous and unique countryside?
Scotland was just kind of a freak accident, to be honest. I'm an author. I was a park ranger. What that means is I was able to live a pretty transient life. I was able to move around a lot. So I moved between Denver, Colorado, Buffalo, New York, rural North Carolina, wild Alaska, just hopping from one friend's basement to another, from one National Park Service job to another. And I didn't have a home, I didn't have a community, I didn't have a family or anything like that. And just one day I kind of woke up and I was 34, and I just decided, this has been a great phase of my life, but I think I'm just ready for the next phase. And I took a flight to Scotland, and I gave a talk at a book festival, and I met who was my now wife, who was living there, and I saw her big ceilings in this Edinburgh flat, which kind of, you look out the window and it overlooks this beautiful stone city, and I thought, I could possibly move here. And Scotland's so wonderful, staying was a pretty easy decision. Not to make things political at all here, but I like having universal health care. I like the fact that my wife had a year of maternity leave. I love the right to roam. I love the fact that my daughter, who's 2.5, she's going to have state-sponsored health care from age 3 on up. I like the fact that she's going to have free tuition. These are things that I didn't have. I went almost 35 grand in debt for my education. So that's just kind of how I wound up in Scotland and decided to stay, yeah.
You've been to most of the continents. What's your favorite place you've ever traveled?
The Brooks Range of northern Alaska, yeah. The Brooks Range is the east to west mountain range extension of the Colorado Rockies, and you go up there, you get on one of those hills, and you look as far as you can see, and you can see nothing but beautiful mountains, and just filled with black bears and wolves and caribou and Dall sheep. You look to the right and you see about 1,000 miles of wilderness, and you look to the left and it seems as if you're looking at 1,000 miles of wilderness. It's just one of the grandest, most wild, most beautiful landscapes I've ever come across, and it just makes you become a different person. It just brings out the wild person in you.